every other talk I've ever done, this has very little technology in it, and that's probably the right thing, because we've seen some pretty good technology that is the underpinnings of cyber currencies, Bitcoin. But we haven't really talked about what's it good for and how can it be used. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'll just preview the talk by saying I'm not necessarily impressed that Bitcoin is any different than anything else. And that's what I think disturbs a lot of people, is that people are claiming that Bitcoin is something different than any other currency. And it really isn't. And that's the bottom line of my talk, the takeaway. There we go. Oops. Okay, so here was the first slide, and I put this subtitle in it, which is when George Burnell, is George here? No. Well, when he and I talked about this, he agreed to find an economist who would give this talk. And then he came back to me and said, hey, you know what? No self-respecting economist is willing to talk about this. So you're going to have a computer scientist talk about this. I have no economics background other than I can travel the web and read and listen to things. And for about the last year, I have been trying to get my head around cyber currencies. And I've suffered through a number of talks where all of the glitter of the technology and the greatness of speculation was the main topic of the talk, and very little was there a conversation about the economics of Bitcoin and why is it any different, any better than anything else. And so I sort of looked around and I found a number of very emotional videos, and I'll show one at the end of the talk about this topic. So when money gets involved in the conversation, people get arbitrarily outrageous in some of their comments, and you'll see some of that in these videos. So I'm going to talk about this today. Let's see. So the introduction is that, so now that we understand, quote unquote, the underpinnings of technologies for cryptocurrencies, and the two talks that have been previous to this are one on public key encryption and the other of which was on blockchain technology. It's time to talk about one of the many applications of these two pieces of technology, and they are frequently put together in the implementation of digital currencies or cryptocurrencies as they're generically referred to. I wish I didn't have to give this talk, to be really honest with you, but about a year ago I agreed with John that I'd give this talk, so that's my basis for coming in here.
You cleverly got other people to give the...
I did. I felt like Tom Sawyer because I gave away the good stuff. Yeah, you want to paint this side of the fence and that side of the fence, and my two compatriots did a great job.
Did you show up your sword toe?
So now I get left with this. Okay, well that's okay. So first of all, some terms. We say cryptocurrency. What's the analog of it? And it's called fiat currency. And what does fiat mean? It's a medium of exchange backed by a binding edict issued by a person in command or a person in authority. And that last thing, that person in command, is precisely what the inventors of cryptocurrencies, or Bitcoin as they exist today, were fighting against. And there is a long history of sort of libertarians or cyberpunks or as the origin of this thing. And in fact, the original paper about Bitcoin came out in 2008, just as the mortgage crisis was being revealed. And there's some speculation that the paper was published in response to this now diminishing trust in the financial system. And that might very well have been one of the starts of this whole thing. So that's what a fiat currency is. Cyber currency is a decentralized and digital way of exchanging value, governed by cryptography and backed by those who use it. And that last term is the one that I added to some stuff I found on the web. Without the people who use Bitcoin believing in it, it won't, like any currency, without the people who use it believing in it, it won't succeed. Yeah.
You said cyber currency, but you wrote cryptocurrency.
Oh, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I confuse the two terms sometimes. Cryptocurrency, is currency based on cryptographic mechanisms to secure it. And sometimes I slip into saying cyber currency, and that's the result of the fact that 20 years ago, one of the first things that was built on the internet, when it became sort of public, was indeed digital currency, and those things came and went, and they failed, and now we have the second wave of it in this thing. But the important part of both of these terms, cryptocurrency and fiat currency, are both currencies, and there are some differences, but fundamentally they're the same in terms of the use of them and the purpose of them. So fiat, I love the fact that they started off with the dictionary saying it ain't a car. It's the term "let it be done," but I think what it really means is a strong ruling, centralized authority that stands behind the currency, so fiat is legal tender backed by a central government typically. And it can take the form of things like dollars, Federal Reserve notes, and it can be represented electronically, as it is when I pull out my credit card. I'm essentially invoking, if you will, a digital currency, but it's not implemented the same way as the cryptocurrencies. But the point is the government controls the supply and you can pay your taxes with it. So for some reason, that paying your taxes with it, it distinguishes fiat currency from cryptocurrencies. So they always say that, well, you can't pay your taxes with Bitcoin.
Yes.
Yeah, well, who knows? Cryptocurrency is not legal tender, as in it is not backed. I guess legal means it's backed by a central government. It is not. It is decentralized and global. It is, as I've said before, in some sense, it's backed by those who use it, which I would hold is actually not so far from, if I pull out $1 and give it to you for a cup of coffee, there is mutual trust that neither of us will be screwed in that transaction. And so as soon as you can develop that about something else, like people use the analogy to a bag of corn. If I could trade that for a cup of coffee, that also works, but it's a little less formal, a little harder to put in your wallet. It's more like a bank credit card, but without the bank. Okay. Otherwise, there's no particular difference between the two. So they both can be called money or currency. They are used as mediums of exchange for transfer of value. They can be used to purchase goods and services for people. Maybe not, and I'm not saying the same scale, but the concept of what they can do. They're governed by supply, demand, scarcity, and other economic factors. They have their value affected by the quality of the system surrounding it. So, for example, if you live in the United States, the dollar is really stable. If you live in Venezuela, the peso is not, or whatever the unit of exchange is. Yeah.
But isn't it also fair to say that you can go into any of 1 million establishments or 100 million establishments in the U.S. and pay with $1, but you might only be able to go into 1,000 establishments and pay with a Bitcoin?
I would say that it depends. If Bitcoin is successful, that's just a matter of time. I mean, it used to be that you could not go into Starbucks or Pete's and pay for your coffee with an Apple iPhone running Apple Pay. but now almost every place, lots of places accept it. It's a question of adoption. And I'm not going to say you can't do that with cryptocurrencies. That's just a question of maturity, I believe.
But isn't the essence of legal tender that you must accept it in a transaction in the United States?
Ever had anybody examine a dollar bill on you?
Oh, I know how flimsy it is.
Yeah.
But legally, that's what legal tender means.
That's true. That's true.
I don't have to accept bitcoins if you come
That's
to me
true.
and we have a deal.
Yep.
Or Canadian dollars. For
Right.
Yeah.
I would hold that's true, and I think that could change in terms of, not that you don't really care. I don't really think about that you have to take my dollar when I go in. It's just that the custom is, I know that if I come up with $100, you may say, I'm sorry, I can't take that.
Well, come with 100 pennies.
100 pennies, either one. Right.
It says right on the note that this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So it implies that you have to take it, but some places don't.
Right. And I'm saying the practicalities of that are probably, there isn't a big difference. Although, I mean, you walk in with a Bitcoin to Pete's and you will not get a cup of coffee, I can guarantee you. Okay, yet.
Or $5,999 change.
Right, exactly. Thank you. But I think it's important to know that the quality of these currencies is indeed impacted by the acceptance and the infrastructure surrounding it. The dollar bill is surrounded by a huge infrastructure of other things that make it work. And the same is going to have to be true of any other currency that tries to establish itself in a country. I would say there is also could be said that there are other foreign currencies that are used, at least travel in the United States. You know, I bet with euros and with pesos, and Canadian dollars, you can transact a little more than you would expect in some places. And then finally, the whole notion of trading them on exchanges is something that currencies seem to have. And it's pretty much the only thing that people are talking about for Bitcoin and cyber currencies these days. In terms of, that's the excitement. Oh, I made, you know, my Bitcoin went up from $5,000 to $10,000 last year at Christmas time. Well, it's now down to $7,000. You know, so, but the point is that if you will, the charlatans of the world in the Bitcoin world are primarily talking about the speculation in currency trading. You have a question?
Yeah, but that's based on the dollar. If you're not really trading with the price for something, the Bitcoin has a price that people will bid on. You're not really trading it.
Well, I don't know I don't see the difference.
Between the price of the trade?
Well, if I walk in with one Bitcoin and I come back with $5,000, is that strikes me at that point it's an instantaneous trade of value of a Bitcoin into dollars. Just like if I were to walk in with a $1,000 bill into a foreign exchange and I was asked to come back with euros, I would come back with an instantaneous value trade between the two. And I don't see that as much, it's a little too subtle for me to see the difference. Okay. Okay, so far what I've done here is present information that I found in a number of different places and put it into my slide. The rest of my talk is based on one paper that is only about 5 pages long in the Harvard Business Review, but it resonated with everything that I've learned over the last year about cyber currencies or cryptocurrencies in general. And it's written by the editor in 2015, so 3 years ago, June, 3.5 years ago almost. Tim Sullivan in the Harvard Business Review, and the URL for that is at the bottom. And my whole presentation is available online. The URL was at the beginning, and I'll put it up at the end, so you can see all this stuff yourself. And the name of the paper is Transparency, Trust, in Bitcoin, and it really applies to all cyber currencies, all cryptocurrencies. trust is the most important key word in that title. And I think that's the message I'm trying to impart today. So it's, as I said, in the Harvard Business Review, it's the best treatment of the subject that I've seen, that I've come across, because it's short and simple. It doesn't try to sort of dress it all up in all these things that you get thinking about, you know, mining and hashtags and blockchain and stuff like that. Those are all great, wonderful concepts for computer scientists, and I am one, I love them, but that's not the issue for a currency, it turns out. That's just an implementation detail.
Excuse me, for those who are interested, there are a number of MOOCs available free of charge that are, 10 weeks long on the subject.
MOOC for the uninitiated?
Massive open online courseware. I don't remember the ones that I've seen, whether they were from EDX or
EDX has
Coursera.
EDX has an excellent one on this whole area. And the reason it's excellent is it's not taught by economists, it's taught by undergraduate students who are interested in this topic. And they got together and basically formed this little club that produced this wonderful course that explains things in, what shall I say, 18 to 22-year-old terms, not a PhD economist who's been seen too many textbooks. And I found it very accessible. So the one that's at Berkeley on EDX is quite good. So it's short and simple, and it basically addresses the primary motivation of the developers of Bitcoin, which is trust.
Do you know who they are?
Who what?
Have they ever found out who the developers of Bitcoin
Oh
are?
yeah, I should say a little bit about that. This article that was written, published in 2008, was written by a pseudonym, and I don't remember what his name is, but there's lots of theories as to what it means. I don't think they really know exactly who it was. There's some theories as to who it is.
The name on the paper says Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right, that's what I said. I don't know what his name is. It turns out that there's a bunch of company names encoded in that name, so whatever. Okay, so his point is that cryptocurrency is really about people, and whatever the associated technical details, the ones that we've talked about, the cryptocurrency is far more important in terms of its position in the real world social relations, the things I've been talking about. Do you believe in it? Do you believe that, and has it established enough credibility in terms of its holding its value so that you're willing to use it, is the real issue. Even though the technology, and I'm the worst offender in some respects of this, the technology gets most of the attention from Bitcoin, and we'll talk a little more about that.
But isn't that because your trust is ultimately based on your trust of that technology?
True, that's true, and the reason it's so mysterious to people is that most people cannot understand the technology.
Right.
And once you understand the technology, you say, yeah, I believe that you can encrypt stuff, and I understand that hash coding results in easy one way, difficult the other way. A whole bunch of things that I've been steeped in all my life, I do trust. And the question is, how do you transfer that trust to the general public? Well, maybe you don't, because I don't really understand how the Fed works. I really don't understand how the monetary supply number that goes up and down works. I just understand that when I go into Pete's and hand him well, actually I hand him my iPhone, but I've developed ways to pay things that have worked over time, and that's again my message with all this. But that again, the heart of any currency is trust, trusting in one another. In the case of a Bitcoin that does not have any foreign government, although trust is precisely the reason Bitcoin was created, because a lot of people in certain sectors had lost trust in the institutions that were administering money and controlling the finances. And so there's other kinds of things, and there's a list of them there. They're all very valuable as long as we agree to their value. In digital currency, there are some differences. and it gets, the author of this article said that it gets more attention because of three reasons. It's unlike a modern fiat currency, which is backed by a central authority. Bitcoin is backed by a widely distributed network, and that's code for the technology that goes into it, the theories behind having multiple copies spread out transparently around the world, the notion that there's no one organization controlling and manipulating the interest in the currency. When I take my credit card out and pay for my coffee at Pete's, they know that I consumed a cup of coffee on this morning, and there's a complete record of that. Unlike that, in Bitcoins, it's an anonymous, you don't have to be identified. And I don't know that that is critical to Bitcoin's success. It might be critical in the minds of the inventors that they be able to be anonymous. And
Like the mafia?
well, I was getting to that. Don't steal my lines here. Yeah, I mean, and it's very easy for us to imagine that all transactions in Bitcoin are rooted in the illegality of some person's activities. However, I suspect there's other things that are just like that, and it eventually cleans itself up to the point where it's mainstream. But yes, there is that issue of the mistrust by the inventors of Bitcoin to the establishment is indeed the source of the anonymity. And I'm not a big lover of anonymity myself. For example, I run the Lexington list, but I prohibit people from joining without joining with a personal email account, because I found that real identities improve the conversation because people have to stand behind what they're saying. And so I'm not a big believer in anonymity, but I do understand that's a characteristic of Bitcoin. And then the other thing, the third point there is, like, unlike other digital goods, which are just very easy to copy and duplicate, Bitcoins are not. I mean, if they're going to have if there's a scarce number of them, then you cannot allow them to be duplicated. And that's something that's a little unusual for us computer scientists, to think that you just can't clone off another copy and work with it. So there's other mechanisms that are, it's more complicated in its implementation because of that characteristic. Although I would hold that, again, if we understood how the dollar currency worked, really understood it, there would be something similar to it. Like, what happens when the dollar bill gets torn and shredded and brought back to the Fed and they issue a new one? What's the controls on that kind of thing? So here we get to the sources of it, and indeed, the order of this is probably pretty accurate. The cyberpunk anarchists seeking to ensure that no one, especially the government, controls our currency. Well, maybe that doesn't resonate with anybody in this room, but I'm sure if I had a much younger audience, it might. There might be some people who sort of go, yeah, I don't like the way I have to pay 3% every time I use my credit card. For example, I run a small business, and rather than include the price of credit in my costs, I discovered that it's legal to quote my customers a price for the work, which includes the cost of credit, and then to offer them a discount if they pay me in cash. That's the legal way of doing that. If you just give them, you have to lay it out in those terms, because the credit card companies have laws installed. But I discovered the cost of credit. When you go to Stop and Shop and pay, say, $150 for your food, you want to think about 1 or 2% of that cost is the cost of you using your credit card. And if you don't think about it, if you don't see it out in front of you, you don't realize that I just paid $7 or something to be able to use my credit card. And $7, that would have gotten me 2 cups of coffee at Pete's maybe. So the point being that this notion that the banking system is, sucking at us at every turn that we make in terms of fees for this and fees for that and blah, blah, blah. The second one is libertarians who decry the policies of the Fed and things like that, or various things that happened once we left the gold and silver standards behind, and then now that just people are controlling the supply of money. There's a fair amount of discomfort with that. The central bankers who control the flow of money are certainly concerned about cryptocurrencies. I don't know that they are necessarily promoting or demoting them, but they certainly are aware of the whole situation. Let me take, I saw you first, yeah.
You say that the Bitcoin, there is no charge for services.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, because there is.
Oh, of course.
In fact, there's gazillion servers out there, and somebody's got to pay for them.
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say anything about, I just said that people, the reason they got disaffected with the central banking and the commercial companies is because they're aware of the fact, probably not totally informed about the charges that are made to them, but they do see it on their bank statements or their credit card and stuff like that. And I didn't say that cryptocurrencies don't have their associated expenses. I think it is fair to say that it can be more transparent because of the general philosophy of cryptocurrencies, which is that they try to put as much stuff aboard. But once people get in there with a profit-making motive, I'm sure they'll find ways of hiding charges to this. So it still has to be very vigilant if you want to keep it cleaner than the current system is. And there was another question. Is that the same?
That's the same question.
Yeah.
A step further. Do we know what the charge is for the Bitcoin transaction?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is like a 6-week-old baby. I don't think we do know very much about what's going to happen when that baby turns to be 16 or 26. It has a long way to go before it settles down. So it could be just as bad. I agree. But I think sort of at this point, saying we don't want Bitcoin because we know it's going to charge us a lot is premature. So I think, and I'm not going to try and say that Bitcoin will be so much better because I've seen a lot of things turn sour once people with greed and profit and all the natural things that are built into us take over. It happened with the internet, for example. When I started working on the internet, man, it was this free 1960s kind of spirit. And by the time we're now, we have 3 companies that control all the world and all the bandwidth and stuff like that. I mean, that's a good example of how things can get subverted very quickly. Yeah.
But you don't mention inflation, and the U.S. government has a policy of planned inflation of about 2.5%, something like that. So every 30 years, prices double.
True.
And Bitcoin would presumably not do that.
Well, I don't know. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that question.
But that would be a motive to go to Bitcoin.
Well,
from your
is inflation a currency issue, or is it some other issue that I haven't really addressed here, which is the sort of I don't know enough about economics to basically answer that. George, maybe you do.
Well, not on this subject, but I would point out to you that currency as we know it is a managed currency, and this is not managed. This is a floating economic issue, and it doesn't change because of transactions. so I don't think you can compare it that way from a monetary policy.
Okay.
In other words, when you pay the 3% you're talking about,
Yeah.
that's a charge. It doesn't affect the value of the currency. That's part of the credit system.
Right.
So, somebody's gonna use this the same way.
That's a good point.
They're gonna charge you a little bit more.
Yeah. But they also charge me to use my debit card, the same amount.
No, they
And that's
don't.
not a credit system. Then maybe not the same. I don't know what the
Somebody
charges
else
are.
does that.
Somebody else. Okay.
Right? So, basically, on that particular issue, historically, it's 4% cost for running a credit system.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you do it in a back room yourself with a clerk, whether you do it with a credit card, whether you do it with something else. If
Yeah.
you're gonna have a credit system, you're talking 4%.
Right.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
So-
Actually, I think that's
So that won't change, but it does not affect Bitcoin.
Right.
It does not affect the US Treasury.
right. That's a good point. I think the whole point is that credit is separated from currency.
Right.
If we were trading beans, we're going to give you credit in beans that you don't have, and you'll pay interest on it. So it really is, separate. Yeah.
Well, you're going down this path of inflation, loosely defined. Inflation is confidence in whatever you're trying to do. In other words, a dollar is trading at a certain value, and if you lose confidence, the value goes down. So that's inflation by definition. Same thing is true for Bitcoin. You see these large fluctuations over time. It's worth $5,000 one day, $20,000 another. It's the same thing in concept. You lose confidence in it, so that's inflation.
Except for the fact that I believe that these swings that you're talking about are not as large as you're talking about. They're from last December when it was like at $10,000. It's down to $7,000 now. It's a lot of money to lose, but it's not 5 to 20.
That's the
But
concept of the
right,
variation.
right. But that's a result of speculation.
Yeah.
And I believe we don't see speculation in dollars by very, very many people. In fact, later on in the talk, there's a quote that I found that says that the number of people who succeed in Forex, which is the trading in money, is 4% of the people actually succeed in making money.
There are all kinds of stories about, like George Soros, for example. He bet on the pound.
Yep.
Okay, and he made a ton of money.
Right.
Made, several $1 billion over the fluctuation of the pound.
Right.
So there are people out
There are people who do it. That's right. And there's tens of thousands of people who don't talk about the losses that they had to George Soros's gains. So there's a story there that says, I'm not going to get into trading currency, thank you very much. But Bitcoin today is essentially asking you to get involved in trading of currency, and that's why I won't touch it. I'd go up to Revere where the new casino is opening. Much more fun. Yeah.
Yeah, the creation of money is not just something that is done by governments. Whenever you get credit for something or credit, or you take a loan, make it obvious, that's actually creating money because you're actually able to stretch the dollar and.
So you're saying, yeah, the lending institution is providing me with money that I don't have, and so
you
there's
buy a car on credit.
right.
So it isn't strictly, the big actor is the Fed, and the Fed could kind of step in to try and counteract the expansion of loans,
Right.
but in its own way. But it isn't, but it's not true that only the government is creating money.
Yeah. I think a couple of guys in the back of the room know a hell of a lot more about economics than I do. So why am I up here? Oh, I'm your friend. I see. Okay. But keep asking those questions because that's the way we'll make the talk whole.
Now, by the way, when we have the potpourri, rather than using up all of Harry's time, we have the potpourri coming up. And maybe that would be an opportunity for some of you who have more insight into this to take 10 or 15 minutes and talk about it.
Okay.
So think about it, those of you who've opined in the last 2 minutes.
Okay, so the next one we're at is the whole notion of the developing world's unbanked. And I don't quite understand this, but apparently these cyber cryptocurrencies are a chance to give them a better financial life, as in providing access to currency, as opposed to apparently they don't have the same systems available to them that we have, like credit systems and things of that sort. Apparently the IRS is pretty interested in what cryptocurrencies are all about, and in fact they've declared cryptocurrencies to be property, not currency, in terms of taxation purposes.
Really?
Yes. They don't treat them the same way as other currencies. Yeah. And then there's our friends, the people who like to buy illegal drugs anonymously, as opposed to those who go to their pharmacy and that's got a lot of, that gets everybody's attention. But in fact, I think it's gone beyond that by now. Originally, there was a lot of, illegal places where you could use bitcoins that were doing all sorts of bad and nasty stuff. And then, of course, at the bottom of the heap, we have the entrepreneurs who want to make some money off this thing. Yes, now we're back to what we understand. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on right now. Every university that has anything to do with computer science and worth their weight in bitcoins has a big program going on. My favorite being MIT has a wonderful website with some beautiful demonstrations of simulations of blockchain, for example, and other pieces of the puzzle. Of course, some of the MIT, everybody but the Sloan School emphasizes the technology. The Sloan School has their group of people over there talking about the economic part of things. Yeah.
Are you going to discuss how you set up an account?
No.
Okay. How does a illegal get into this system?
Same way a legal would. As in, the point of the illegal piece is that it's anonymous. So if you're careful and you don't tell them your real name when you sign up, and apparently you can do that, you can't be traced. That's the...
You would have to give cash, wouldn't you? Kind of say, hey, here's a thing for a check for my...
my bank, yeah, I don't know, I guess so. I don't know, I haven't really investigated that angle yet as to how you join as an illegal, but maybe that's another source
You have a couple of weeks to figure it out and then tell all of us.
Yeah, right. And I think the point of the author of the Harvard Business Review's article was that everybody sees cryptocurrency through their own set of rose-colored eyeglasses, and I see it a different way, perhaps, than somebody else in this list of people who have been involved in the development of Bitcoin.
Has China outlawed the use of cryptocurrencies because they're afraid of people taking money out of the country?
Yeah, I think actually I read something recently that China has put some restrictions on it. I mean, that would be predictable because they are very much of a closed, controlled society, government, and they would be the last one you would think.
China has the biggest Bitcoin mining farms.
Yes, that's true, but I think in terms of its use inside China, it may not be as I mean, that's a different issue in terms of, I mean, they're just world citizens doing that, spending, they don't even have, well, whatever.
Yeah, maybe they can't spend it there.
Yeah.
Well, they have laws that specify whether you can take money out of the country or not. So Bitcoin is a way of getting money out of the country, and so quote unquote, you're violating their laws.
Yeah.
Is your interest just based on curiosity about how it works?
How I got interested in it? Yeah. Yeah, she asked me how did I get interested in Bitcoins and things like that. Well, I got interested from the technology side. And I wasn't so much interested in it from the standpoint of speculation. Although if there's a great opportunity to speculate, I suppose I'd do it. But it was largely, I wanted to figure out what's beneath the covers of this? Is it real? Is it, all the questions that a lot of people have here, I think. And that's why I started this whole discussion out with the technology, because I couldn't stomach listening to someone delivering a talk like I'd heard from these other guys. I wanted the people to recognize that there is some legitimate technology that could, in fact, implement this, and that's why we started off in the order we did, going bottom up as opposed to top down.
Can we do a quick poll? Has anybody bought or sold Bitcoin in the room? So it's a much talked about.
Yes.
Hardly anybody does.
Yes. Well, in this room, in this age group.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is about my same age who was given Bitcoins, and he was so excited last Christmas when the 10 Bitcoins that he was given had raised in value to $10,000 per coin. I haven't had the heart to talk to him about how's he doing today, because I know exactly how he's doing. He's 30% down from last Christmas. So
He's still at $70,000.
he still has $70,000 that somebody gave him,
Yeah.
essentially. So he's an if you had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin,
Not plucked.
yeah, right.
Well, what's happening in Canada?
I don't know.
I thought they were hacked.
Oh,
That's
yes.
a different thing.
Yeah, that's like a bank robbery. What happened in Waltham last week? Was there a bank robbery there? There might have been. It's a great example of someone being robbed. And that's all it is. It's not saying anything about, it's saying that maybe the hygiene of administration of a piece of software wasn't being followed. Because I believe if properly used, the software can indeed guarantee safety of the investment. However, it can be misused also. Yeah.
So this was a small outfit that was basically taking in small clients. Like you would go to Fidelity or someplace, you have your account number, and they do all the buying and selling for you. What intrigues me is to buy and sell Bitcoin, you have to go through all of this cryptographic technology, which I would believe this small outfit was buying Bitcoin and selling Bitcoin for their clients, but they in turn have to have all of this encrypted technology. So how could they be hacked and all this money disappear? Other than maybe embezzlement of the principals?
Yeah, I read about that particular incident that there were people who were saying, this kind of thing has happened before, and they said that this particular one had a lot of the same earmarks of basically embezzlement by the actual organization. And I don't think the answer is in yet on what exactly caused the problem. So, again, just showing that Bitcoin is just like every other currency in terms of what people will do to get it nefariously.
But they don't have all of the powers of the government like the federal security people we have.
We didn't have it before 1930 either.
Right, what's that?
We didn't have it before 1930 either.
Well, but the point is we have now.
We do now, right. And I assume that there will be some, if there is a demand for it, someone will rise up and provide something of that sort. It's not inherently flawed, is my point. Yeah.
What does it, I just can't get it in my head what it means to steal all these Bitcoins. I mean, how do you steal them? Where did they get, did the cash come out of a
You have to
machine?
break the code.
Well, I don't care about the technical aspect.
I don't know.
I want to know where who's got the money.
Well, basically, since don't forget it's anonymous, so you can, if you get, so let's work backwards. If someone hands you Bitcoins that they have gotten illegally, you can hold on to them with utter confidence that no one will ever, in theory, ever find that you have illegal Bitcoins.
Right. But if the system is broke, having Bitcoins is meaningless, right?
Well, the system is not broke. The system.
The system has no money in it anymore.
No.
Only the
It has no Bitcoins in it anymore. Those Bitcoins have been transferred elsewhere, and someone has them.
I don't understand that concept.
So you have a wallet, which is, you have a ledger of how many Bitcoins you
Well, my understanding is this company in Canada said, we'll give you $5,000, I'll buy you a Bitcoin, which is selling for 6,000 something. And because we're buying them in volume.
Uh-huh.
And they took the people's cash, not Bitcoins, they took their cash and then they disappeared.
They
So it's
took
just a
his cash.
scam.
So it's like any
Oh,
other.
I see, it was a scam in the middle.
Oh, okay. See, I don't know the details of it, so I do believe though that the mechanisms that have been implemented for Bitcoin, if indeed followed, can result in a secure system that will not result in that kind of loss. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the security of the system? Because there are rumors flying around that there, for example, quantum computers will be strong enough to break even Bitcoin. We're a long way from having quantum computers that are powerful enough, but the point is, the threat is out there. Can you elaborate on that threat?
Well, I think there are several hypotheses in your statement. First of all, you said quantum computers. There's number one. I hate to be skeptical, but so far no one has really produced one.
Sufficient quantity,
well,
right.
Or no, even doing anything particularly real. I think I don't know. I mean, someone can convince me otherwise, but I've not heard of any wonderful things being done with it. So there's number one.
In Scientific American, they quoted several sources of people that have built quantum computers. The problem is that there's the value of them is 10 qubits, and that's really not powerful enough to do things.
Right.
So that's really the issue of what the power to do things with it, or is it just a scientific oddity?
Excuse me, Harry, how much material do you have to go through?
I don't have that much more.
Because we're going off on some tangents, I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
we could-
finish.
Let me answer quickly. I think the first hypothesis was that quantum computers will be affordable enough and available enough to break through a encryption system whose key can be lengthened to increase the amount of work needed to reverse the encryption. So there are ways of dealing in encryption with a more powerful computer. So you make the key may be 1,000 bits long now. You make it be 10,000 bits. That's not going to affect very much, but it certainly will make it a hell of a lot more difficult to crack.
Well, I agree. My only point was that the concept that Bitcoins are impenetrable. Maybe with today's computational power that may be the case, but projecting off a few years,
No, but when I say
it's still going to be the same.
No, when I say impenetrable, what I'm referring to is the strength of the cryptography used. And I'm saying that strength, it's built in to be able to improve it to match the challenge of the
Again, there are articles out there that suggest that given sufficient computer power, that will be penetrated.
What he's saying is he can
Yeah,
increase the penetration capability.
I understand that. I understand
Ahead
that.
of the development of the hardware.
And what I'm trying to say is, in magazines like Scientific American and a few other journals, well, the point is that they're making speculations.
There's the second point that, you can speculate and hypothesize a lot that it can be broken, but I've yet to see anything really credible, say in the New York Times, for example, saying that they've figured a way of how to break RSA encryption for any key length, for example. I've not seen that one. Actually, I'm very close friends with Ron Rivest, who's the R and RSA encryption, and I was thinking of if it's possible at some point to get him to come over and talk to us about encryption. Would be an interesting topic. There was another question? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that Bitcoins are based on a hash that's a NIST standard. It's just like RSA versions now are NIST standards.
Yes.
And in the normal encryption, I know they have a study group out now, or a competition now, to come up with new encryption methods that are quantum computer proof or something
Right.
like that. So I assume they're doing the same thing for
Right.
hashes.
And I actually wouldn't be surprised if some of the people at MIT are indeed tracking that exactly that way, thinking about the other side of quantum computing is quantum difficulty, if you will. Okay, let me just move on a little more.
So if it's discovered on how to crack things in a reasonable amount of time, then like you said, you'll have to migrate things to a newer technology or more bits
Yeah.
to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But the NSA won't tell you when they
Well,
know
there's
that.
trapdoors that theoretically are
Okay.
built in too.
So if you go to this online, there's 3 books that the author of this Harvard Business School or Business Review article recommended. These were written in before 2015. So, but he recommended them, and he recommended it from the standpoint of understanding what the ecosystem and the impact of Bitcoin or but I have to say that these are probably 3 years old. They're probably dated by now, but they are there for your. But I'll show you the URL of this talk, and you can go through it to get to it. So what are Tim Sullivan's, the author of the article's conclusion? He says, if this is a revolution, it's still very much a work in progress. That digital currency as a grand experiment has less than even odds of changing the world. So in other words, he's been around the block and seen many things with equal fervor being promoted, and they never actually appear. I mean, if you ever look at products that go in front of CES, Consumer Electronics Show, and you actually never see them, Bitcoin might be one of those, although a lot of people have seen it. And then he said, if it is a revolution, by the time we notice it, it'll be too late to change anything. And that's pretty much true. I mean, was the web a revolution? Yeah. But in fact, we can't do anything about the web anymore. All of its pitfalls, email, was that a revolution? Absolutely. But again, I was friends with Ray Tomlinson, who did the first email, and he told me his biggest regret was that he hadn't put in some sort of security mechanism into the original protocols, because that has ruined email as far as he was concerned. So that kind of thing it has happened time and again with technology. My conclusions is that Bitcoin has attracted most of its attention because of the speculation in investing rather than as a currency for exchange. And I think every talk that I've been to, with the exception of the 3 wonderful talks here, have been guys talking in lingo and shiny technology, and all the economists in the audience, and there were some, were very upset by the fact that he couldn't answer the kind of questions that I can't answer either. But nevertheless, he was the expert on this, giving a talk that we paid money for. So the second point is that's right. That 96% of people who dabble in currency trading, like as in these days buying a Bitcoin, lose money, and that's true for both traders in fiat currencies like the dollar and also in cryptocurrency. So I would stay away from this stuff personally, stay as far away. And then the charlatans like to talk technology and lingo, and I believe that their fundamental purpose is to promote speculation, because they own Bitcoins and they're eager to see people get more excited than they are so that they can sell their Bitcoins and make a profit. Another one is, like the invention of the World Wide Web, some interesting technology has been promoted as a result of the quote-unquote invention of cryptocurrencies. And I say that because, having been involved in the invention of almost all the things that were cobbled together to do the World Wide Web 15 years after we did them at BBN, I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder about the fact that they happened to hit the sweet spot when the web came out, or Tim Berners-Lee did, and life went off in like an explosion. And we were working hard, basically doing the initial stuff. Well, I think the same thing could be said for public key encryption, hash functions, blockchain ledgers. All those kind of things have been around before, and we just happen to put them together again and come up with, in this particular time when people were mistrusting the monetary authorities and the organizations in the world, and that's where Bitcoin came from. So like any currency, it'll take some time before we develop all the stability mechanisms that have been developed over the years for fiat currencies. So things like deposit insurance or currency exchanges or lots of other mechanisms that I don't even understand that are in place to keep a fiat currency stable will also have to be developed for cryptocurrencies in order for them to succeed. And I don't think, I'm not sure what that first sentence was. It was the last thing I wrote, I guess. I didn't read it too carefully. Basically, I would not recommend that anybody buy Bitcoins unless you like to gamble, and then I'd go up to Revere or wherever Springfield and go into one of the casinos. It probably is going to be more fun to do. Okay, so that's, yeah.
What is the mechanism that makes a Bitcoin have a value of $5,000 one day and $8,000 the next day? Nothing has changed. Is it? What has changed to make the value?
I stepped up the second day and offered $5,000 or $8,000 for it. That's what changed.
Why did you have to offer $8,000? I don't understand that mechanism. What's happening there?
It's supply and demand.
It's like any other commodity.
You
Could be
bid?
corn that's being traded on
Well,
exchange.
why is there only 5,000 corn kernels? Why they just make more Bitcoins? Why-
No.
No.
Because the miners get a slight
No.
flow rate. There's rules on how you make new.
There's a limit on the number of Bitcoins that can ever be made.
There's a limit?
Yes.
And it's also very hard to get a new one.
So Bitcoin, that's the company. Bitcoin has 8,000 Bitcoins, and if you want to buy a Bitcoin, you're subject to the going price.
Yep.
Correct. I mean, it's not that those numbers aren't right, but yes.
Or you can mine it yourself.
But but even if you mine it, there's a limit to the number of Bitcoins that can ever be mined.
Why is there a limit?
It's built into the algorithms.
In that sense, it's sort of like trading in gold.
Yes.
I mean, except the more gold can come on the market through mining.
But we know that there's no more gold than there is in the mass of the earth. So there's a limit. And it's that sense, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Harry, could you comment briefly on the economics of Bitcoin, the current economics of Bitcoin mining in terms of how much money people have to spend to mine Bitcoins in terms of equipment, energy costs, and then the second part of the question is I've seen a lot of concern expressed around the environmental impact of the computational intensity in terms of energy cost if Bitcoin ever becomes majorly successul.
Yeah, I don't know the answers to those questions. Maybe that's what he's going to talk about at the potpourri.
Give you a brief overview before we leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep talking about technology sort of out of this discussion because that's okay. So what I'd like to show you now is at least one of these videos, and I think we have enough time. What time is it? 11 o'clock? Yeah, we have enough time to show this one at least. About cyber currency. And I warn you, put your seatbelt on because this is the ultimate argument that goes on, and actually I haven't tested to see whether this works. There's Bill Gates. Now, how do we get the volume of this thing going? Did I do this right?
Volume is the circle.
Oh, wow.
Volume is the circle.
The circle.
The circle. This circle. Now, this thing?
While he's figuring that out, just something I want to mention. Tomorrow night, George Brunel has an economics forum that he's been running for, I don't know, a year or so. And Peter Diamond, who's a 2010 Nobel laureate professor from MIT in economics, is giving a talk at the library. 7 o'clock, George?
Yes.
7 o'clock at the library tomorrow. Simultaneously with that, there is a talk at the depot by Dan Leclerc on World War I, which is part of a 7 to 10 session series on World War I items.
4.
So,
There's only 4.
no, there are more than 4.
Well, talks, in this series there are 4 talks.
Okay, so, fine. So there are two things to do tomorrow night.
Is it being recorded by LexMedia?
Yes, the one in the depot is. And George, is yours being recorded too?
Yes, it is.
Okay, no problem.
The
Yeah,
one
yeah,
that
LexMedia.
spoke about, I think, the end of World War I, had the exit strategy on
Yeah,
it.
that's the Dan McClurk talk.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've had Dan McClurk here in front of our group,
All right.
maybe 6 months ago.
So you
Put
can
our-
stay home and watch it on LexMedia.
But
Eventually.
now you can't watch it tomorrow night on LexMedia.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's start this one. And, maybe? Okay, wait a second.
Okay, fine.
So what do I have to do? It's coming out of my, I guess I
Let's
gotta,
see, there's a,
Boy, I knew
hang
there
on a
was-
second.
I knew there was a reason for Bob to come today.
Yeah.
Wait a
all the way
second.
down from New Hampshire.
It might be coming out just fine. It's a question of whether my,
There we go.
There you go.
Lights going up. Give it another shot.
you got hum.
oh, we got hum, it's right. And what's this
gonna be
called? This
very
is
loud.
called,
Yeah, click on that.
yeah.
Here, it's gonna be Epson.
It puts it on your HDMI
Epson?
cable.
Epson
Epson.
PJ HDMI.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you got the sound
Okay.
selected?
I do have that sound selected. Now let's see if I can actually provide something in it. Not that one. Wait a second. What's this? Clicked the wrong thing, sorry. Here we go. Okay.
Plug it into this box here, the modem. I then take another wire from the modem and plug it in where the telephone was. I can then switch on the modem. It's now telling me to phone up the main Pressel computer.
Let me start this again.
connection to make. And take
Okay. Now we'll start up again. And this is not the wrong. This is not the wrong. Let's see. Where did I do there?
In the middle.
Hang on a second. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay. Hang in with this video. This is not the wrong video starting this way.
and I simply remove the telephone jack and plug it into this box here, the modem. I then take another wire from the modem and plug it in where the telephone was. I can then switch on the modem. It's now telling me to phone up the main Pressel computer.
It's a very simple connection to make.
Extremely simple. I'm now waiting for the computer to answer me. And
Things are starting to happen.
things are starting to happen.
Why did you buy a computer?
Well, I was very interested in the new technology and didn't want to be left behind. I don't think it's only for the youngsters at school now. I think us older ones will have to learn a lot about it.
What is internet anyway? Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. Wait, how does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
The world is in financial disarray. Currencies failing, economies in wild flux, jobs being lost. But what if you could build an entirely new economy? One specifically designed for the digital realm.
I see your wife.
That is the dream behind Bitcoin.
This is right for me, I don't know.
Bitcoin, for those of you who don't know, is an electronic online currency that was created in 2009. It was made by someone who did it under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto.
Like any economy, you don't want too much too fast because then the value of your currency drops, or so slow that your economy grounds to a halt. It's designed to be a self-stabilizing economy. Whether it actually is that way though, well that is a little bit more complicated.
Because some people have said, hey, Bitcoin is the answer to those problems. Are you a believer?
Well, Bitcoin is exciting because it shows how cheap it can be. Bitcoin is better than currency in that you don't have to be physically in the same place. And of course, for large transactions, currency can get pretty inconvenient.
And what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a currency on the internet.
I sent 100 euros worth of Bitcoin from here in Tokyo directly to you guys through this camera, through the network, through the TV, right into your home. If I had tried to do that, send you the money with a traditional bank, it would have taken several days and probably cost 30 euros. I just did it right now with Bitcoin instantly basically for free and didn't have to ask anybody for permission. I didn't need a bank, I didn't need a government, I didn't need anybody. I just needed myself and you and our smartphones to do it. That's the power of Bitcoin.
Wall Street is fraud, America is fraud, the world is fraud, banks are fraud, central banks are fraud. We live in an era of fraud. It's all based on fraud, and they get a percentage of the fraud. That's the business model. To suggest that there is any moral or ethical aspect to anything that's going on now is to be completely naive about the fact that we live in an era dominated by financial terrorists, jihadis of banking. They're here to kill you and themselves. They believe in an ideology, not the Quran, but Adam Smith, that they completely misread and interpret as something to justify their blowing themselves up. Janet Yellen's a terrorist. Mario Draghi's a terrorist. The Central Bank of Japan is a terrorist. These are the real terrorists. Offense received.
This community is switching to what they think is a better monetary system. A system in which banks are no longer needed because payments can be made directly from one person to another.
Bitcoin is fundamentally different because in Bitcoin, you don't owe anyone anything and no one owes you anything. It is not a system based on debt. It is a system based on ownership. And no one can censor it, no one can seize it, no one can freeze it.
It's November the 2nd, 2008, just 6 weeks after the Lehman Brothers collapse. And all over the world, there are panicked debates about how to save the banks. Then, on a little visited web forum for cryptographers, a document appears in which a completely new monetary system is proposed. The visionary author calls himself Satoshi Nakamoto.
These were the darkest days of the financial crisis, so that to me suggests a very clever mind that saw an opportunity, the perfect opportunity to introduce a new radical technology and a new radical approach to money and finance at just the right moment when people would be very open to making this big shift that's required to adopt a new currency.
What's exciting for me is like a global economy. Right now we say we have a global economy, but I can't take $1 and give it to you in the Netherlands and then you know what to do with it, right? You would have to go and change it to your native currency. And when you kind of eliminate that step, and I can just send you one form of payment and you can send me a product in a matter of seconds, that starts to change things from a global perspective.
How could this digital coin invented by this Satoshi Nakamoto become hundreds of times more valuable than the dollar? And why do enthusiasts like Roger Fear want the world to switch to bitcoins?
I'm giving every single person here 1,000 yen worth of bitcoins, which is like $8 and something cents.
Back in the early days, you know, I'd get phone calls from my buddies, oh, hey man, I lost 10,000 bitcoins because my computer blew up, right? Back then, one Bitcoin was less than a penny, right? So nobody cared. They lost $10. I don't care, right? And now 10,000 Bitcoins, that's, you know, $5 million. That's a big deal, right?
I think a lot of people are underestimating the way in which Bitcoin and the blockchain are going to change the power structures in society in general. I mean, I grew up in the U.S. and I see all these people like, yeah, nuke everybody in the Middle East and kill them all. And then they have the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, on 60 Minutes, one of the most popular news shows in the U.S. And they asked her, they said, like, there's reports that more than 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of U.S. sanctions. And she looks back at her with a straight face and she goes, it was a really tough decision, but I think that it was worth it. Worth murdering 500,000 kids because of what the government did? And I apologize for crying, but it just disgusts me from my core when I see government people murdering people around the world. It's not just theoretical, these are real people with real lives. And it's real people, and Bitcoin has the power to undermine everything they're doing to people around the world. And I'm sorry for shouting, but it just disgusts me what these people in government do. And they do it through central banking and through the control of the money supply, and Bitcoin takes that away from them.
You can buy Bitcoin at the Shell station. Check it out. $2, hit finish. Whoa. $2 Bitcoin. Just like that. From this machine. I just turned cash into digital currency.
So thinking that it's too late to get involved in Bitcoin is like thinking it's too late to get involved with the internet or too late to get involved with using a cell phone. Like, it's not too late to get involved in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin becomes really popular all over the world, Bitcoins are going to have to be worth at least tens of thousands of dollars a Bitcoin, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per Bitcoin. So thinking it's too late to get involved with Bitcoin is like thinking it's too late to get involved with using the internet. Of course not. Like, it's ubiquitous in our lives, and Bitcoin's going to become ubiquitous in our lives as well.
So,
who paid for that video?
Who said what?
Who paid for that video?
Well, guess. No one. It was everybody shared, and you know. So it was pretty amusing, but you know, for a different perspective audience, it might be very appealing, and for people who are in generally mistrust of the mechanisms of society, financial mechanisms, of which I would hold there are a lot who feel that way. This is the appeal of Bitcoin. So yeah.
There have
With
been
the lights
other
on?
cryptocurrencies that have been started up, right?
There's thousands of them. Yes.
Okay, so most of this discussion has assumed, and say the video, basically assumed that there's one cryptocurrency. Economically speaking, what happens when you end up with several cryptocurrencies and people have to start exchanging them, one for the other?
Well,
the economics.
I would say that this is obviously a promotional video, and like any good entrepreneur, if they don't feel as if theirs is the absolute best thing, they shouldn't be investing in it. I understand what you're saying,
what I'm
but
getting at is that in some sense it's like real money, current money.
Yeah.
When that sort of thing happens, because then you start trading one for the other, and it's no longer just a store of value in the usual sense. You come back to having many currencies, which is one of the things that they were complaining about.
yeah, I agree with you. I trust me. This is not, I'm not trying to.
I know you're not pushing it.
But so what to say?
I mean, that's in the future, possibly, of cryptocurrencies too, and it's not part of the hype or the.
No, that's right. What happens if Bitcoin loses and Ethereum wins? You know, for example. Yeah. I mean, for example, I was a huge, not investor, but user of Alta Vista. It was the best search engine you could imagine at the time. Yeah.
So I can imagine the resistance to all of this has got to be fierce across the world, because governments inflate in order to reduce debt, right? Look at Venezuela.
Right.
Just one example.
Right.
There's plenty of them. The U.S. will do the same down the road, no doubt.
Right.
Right now. But the need for banks will disappear. Can you imagine the financial system upheaval with all of this?
Yeah. Yep. I can imagine also that the people involved in this will invent the necessary structures to support it. Just like the cryptographers will invent stronger cryptography to deal against the quantum computers. Same response. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.